Good evening from the Barnes & Noble flagship store in Manhattan's Union Square. Tonight, all of our conversations are about books. They define who we are. They tell us about our history and our culture and our heroes and our tragedies. There has always been a special place for books, authors, publishers, and editors at my table. We choose to do this in a bookstore, to be surrounded by books and the people that are buying, browsing, and talking about them. Here tonight, in this store, we begin a series of shows all about books. But before we sit down with our first guest, writer Patricia Cornwell, let's take a look at the big news this week. All the talk in the publishing world has been Monica's story, written by biographer Andrew Morton. Publishing insiders have been debating whether Monica's story has legs or if the public has had enough of the scandal. If the ratings for last night's interview with ABC's Barbara Walters are any indication, people apparently want to hear from the former White House intern. Here is an excerpt from that interview.
Monica, did you know that this book, Leaves of Grass, was a book given by the president to Hillary Clinton as the first gift he gave to her?
No, I didn't know that at the time. I came to learn that in this past year.
Well, knowing this, does it make you feel better or worse?
I guess a mix of the two. Clearly, I guess it's something he gave to people that meant something to him, but at the same time, it takes away the genuineness of the gesture.
Expecting to take advantage of the intense interest in Monica Lewinsky, Andrew Morton's publisher, St. Martin's Press, had its largest initial printing ever at 400,000 copies. While the 288-page book hit stores nationwide just today, the number of pre-orders placed through online booksellers already guarantees it a place on the bestseller list. Speaking of bestseller list, number one on the fiction list continues to be a favorite of American readers, John Grisham. Following The Testament, at number 2, Southern Cross by Patricia Cornwell. Number 3, Ransom by Julia Garwood. Number 4, Man in Full by Tom Wolfe. Number 5, The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. Number 6, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Number 7, Send No Flowers by Sandra Brown. Number 8, In Danger's Path by W.B. Griffin. And number 9, Seize the Night by Dean Koontz. And number 10, Billy Straight by Jonathan Kellerman. Moving to the nonfiction list, number 1, The Greatest Generation by Tom Brokaw. Number 2, Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. Number 3, Blind Man's Bluff by Sherry Sontag and Christopher Drew with Annette Lawrence Drew. Number 4, The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama and Howard C. Cutler. Number 5, The Century by Peter Jennings and Todd Brewster. Number 6, Playing for Keeps by David Halberstam. Number 7, Beauty Fades, Dumb is Forever by Judith Scheindlin. Number 8, Traveling Mercies by Anne Lamott. Number 9, Conversations with God, Book 1 by Neil Donald Walsh. Number 10, The Endurance by Caroline Alexander. We're back. Patricia Cornwell is the woman whose book, Southern Cross, occupies the number 2 position on that list for the second straight week. She joins me now, along with our audience here at Barnes & Noble. She is one of the country's most popular crime novelists with 11 novels in 9 years. Her readers still can't get enough. Her latest novel is a sequel to Hornet's Nest and part of a series that departs from medical examiner Case Carspetta. She continues her examination of big city police, this time in Richmond, Virginia. She is the only woman in the United States to receive England's Gold Dagger, one of the most prestigious crime-writing awards in the world. I am pleased to have her back on this program, and especially back here for an audience of book lovers in a place where there are lots of books. Welcome back.
Thanks, Charlie. Great to be here.
Thank you for coming up from Richmond to do this. You like taking a departure from Kay, to getting away from her to write something else?
I do now and then. I don't write a Hornet's Nest, Southern Cross type book every year. I actually couldn't anyway to do 2 a year. But the Scarpetta books are so intense. It's hard to live in that world for the period of time it takes me to do a book. And you have to remember, too, the research is real. So I am going into morgues. I am writing with the police. I am doing all this technical research. And it's just exhausting. So to be able to do a Southern Cross and actually be able to laugh and show the absurdities, the far side of life on the street with police and so forth is a great relief.
You still do that research, the kind of thing you did when you were first learning your skill?
Oh, yes. In fact, I probably do more of it because with each book, I want to show you something I haven't shown you before. For example, in the one I'm working on right now, I wanted to use Interpol. So I've been to France, I guess, 3 or 4 times, and that's a whole new world. I didn't know anything about Interpol, and that's just one of many things, but I have to go do that.
But when you become as famous as you are, with all those bestsellers and the reputation you have, do people change because you're riding in the backseat of the car with them, because you're there observing what they do?
You know, that's a really good question. It's begun to pose a bit of a problem. I can't ride with the police in Richmond, for example, and just show up at crime scenes or in the emergency room, because now it's a distraction. People know you're there, and they also, in some cases, don't want you there because it draws attention. So on the one hand, it gives you more access to some places and less access to places you used to go to all the time.
Is it easier now that you've done this for a while and been recognized and written bestsellers and had people tell you that they can't wait for the next?
It's easier in the sense that you're known and you have some confidence about how your books are going to do. It's very flattering to have people respect what you do and to admire you. The hard part is you've got to keep up the quality. There's a lot more pressure, a lot more demands. If you fall, you're going to fall a lot harder. And you also have to stay fresh. I'm writing the 10th Scarpetta book right now. The farther along I go in the series, the more demanding it is for me to come up with something different and original and not start recycling earlier stories.
Case Scarpetta is from the first person.
Right.
Southern Cross is from the third person.
Those
Why do
would
you
be
switch
easier.
gears?
Because the Southern Cross series, for lack of a better way to explain it, gives me an opportunity to show something from many different perspectives. It's not just seen through the eyes of one person, and so you can go around to different characters and show one event as seen by 4 or 5 different people and what goes through their minds and the absurdity of how they translate something that is, happening right in front of them. And it's what happens in life. You get somebody who sees something and everybody's got their own rendition, and some of it is absolutely ridiculous and is hysterical.
Tell me the story of Southern Cross. I mean, here you have your characters moving from Charlotte, North Carolina to Richmond and becoming involved in what story?
Well, I have my characters involved in a National Institute of Justice grant so they can move from police department to police department and try to straighten out those that are besieged. And so they come to Richmond, and Chief Hammer from Charlotte becomes the chief in Richmond. And what I wanted to deal with in Southern Cross was the problem of juvenile crime, which has become one of the worst problems, I think, in this country. The rates have just shot sky high. We hear about it all the time, the school shootings and what have you. And I wanted to address that and see what my characters would do with a gang of juveniles. So that was really pretty much the crux of what I came up with when I wanted to write that book. In terms of all the other little stories that go on around it, that just sort of happened as the book was evolving. I don't always know, but sometimes, like I did research in a place where they replace windshields in cars, because I have Bubba with a cracked windshield, and he's going
What's Bubba's last name?
Fluck. I saw that in the newspaper, someone named Fluck, and I said, how is that guy's life ruined by a name like that? And so I was at this place learning how to replace a cracked windshield. And while I was there, one of the guys started talking about coon hunting, as in, raccoon hunting. And it struck me as so eccentric and bizarre, I decided to go out with some of these guys in the swamp one night and went coon hunting with them, and then came up with this wonderful idea for a very funny part of the book where Bubba and Smudge, his friend, go out, coon hunting in one of the swamps. So you just kind of pick it up as you go along.
And the idea for the driving narrative of this came from?
Well, from knowing about the real crimes that juveniles are committing, like the ATM and what I wanted to do, although a lot of it is funny, when you least expect it, I slam you with something that's not funny at all, with real violence, to remind you that this is not a joke.
Andy Brazil is in this.
Yes.
Yeah. And you once said to me on another interview that if Andy Brazil is what you would be if you were a man.
I'd like to.
Because he plays tennis.
Because he's really good looking.
Good looking. What else?
He plays tennis. He's a sensitive, good person, and he's fearless. I think he's the sort of person that everybody would like to know. I would consider him a very enlightened human being, the way all of us would like to be. We're not so caught up in gender as caught up in people.
Yeah. It takes you how long to write Southern Cross? It took you.
Including the research, probably the better part of a year.
And you can write one book a year?
I try to.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do more than that.
What's the schedule? Give us a sense of how do you plot it out, the whole thing?
I come up with a concept. For example, in the Scarpetta book I'm doing right now, I came up with the concept of an unidentified body showing up in Richmond that clearly has European connections, which is how Interpol gets involved. And that was basically my concept, and I wanted to go on from there. Yeah, I don't outline.
You had a body in Richmond that came from overseas.
Right.
And you're off and running.
And it shows up in a Richmond port. And so I just start the research and get ideas about where the story's going.
Did you read this story somewhere? I mean, did you read somewhere where there was a body that actually showed up in Richmond?
No. I simply think I work the stories the way Scarpetta and my characters would work the cases. And with her, she's going to start with being called. She goes to this scene. There's this body in a cargo container that's decomposed. It's probably come from Belgium, where the ship originated from. And, what does this mean? Why is it here? Where is it going? What is the cause of death, which you can't discover? And I start working the case the way they do, and hopefully they show me the answers along the way.
What do you do to get to be a better writer? How do you go from wherever you are now to the next level in terms of performance?
That's a wonderful question, because the main part of that is you have to want to. I think a lot of people, when they become very successful, don't necessarily think about becoming a better writer. What they do seems to be working fine. In my case, that's my biggest goal. Is I always want to feel like my next book was better than the last. And if the day ever comes that I don't think I'm becoming a better writer, then I will feel like my career is over. I think that one way is by reading brilliant writers. I love to read little bits of Mark Helprin because I think he's just a gorgeous writer. I like to read poetry. I love to read biographies to see how people put facts together to make good stories. And I think it's just, I work very hard on each novel.
You call yourself a crime novelist,
right?
Not a mystery writer. What's the difference?
Mysteries conform to the conventions of a genre. It definitely has a structure, a kind of a whodunit. There's an artificiality, a bit of a game-playing puzzle aspect to it. But what I see, there is no puzzle or mystery. I mean, if you had someone who you loved was murdered, would you like the homicide detective calling it a mystery? And when I go into the morgue and see these dead bodies, this is about crime, about violence, and about people. There is no game playing about it whatsoever.
Who is the Michael Jordan of crime novelists if you're not?
I don't read crime novels. I would say I would put Agatha Christie on the top of the list, although they seem like very simplistic stories.
And some would say she's a mystery novelist, too.
She is. But she was a brilliant technician, and I believe if Agatha Christie were writing today, she'd be doing exactly what I'm doing. She was limited in the research she could do back then. I mean, she could go on archaeology digs with her husband or something, but I think she'd be going to morgues and forensic labs and writing something that was more befitting the age that she lived in. I think she probably was the most brilliant, and I would love to see what she would do if she were here now, but I really don't read fiction at all, except some of the work I just told you about that I read to learn the craft of writing better.
Do critics matter?
Well, they don't matter in terms of sales. I try not to let them matter, but deep down inside it always stings. And I've gotten to where I don't read reviews hardly ever, because I think the more successful you become, the more you get trivialized by critics, and the more they like to pick on you. I mean, somehow if you make a lot of money writing, that must mean you're not very literary. And I don't think that's fair, but the trade-off is I'd rather be a bestseller than get nice reviews.
Do you write because, in a sense, it's what you do, or because you have to? In other words, you know what I mean?
I have to. I've always thought that the worst thing that could ever happen to me is if I were locked up in prison and not allowed to write. I would have no reason to exist in my own mind, and it's hard to explain that to people that are close to you, that when I say I need to go in isolation for a while and do this and you don't understand, if I don't, I have nothing left.
Then what will be the hardest thing about living with you then? The notion that you need A lot of private time?
Other than my cranky disposition at times.
Yeah.
I think the isolation part of it, and my friends have to be very understanding that I will literally just disappear sometimes. I'll go months, don't call anybody, don't see anybody, you know, with rare exception, and I live with my characters, and if I don't do that, my characters are very, very jealous, and they don't talk to me or they don't cooperate very well. It's like they become detached from me, and I can't figure out, I just can't live through them the way I must when I'm writing a book.
When you're where you are now, with the success you've had, and you get started, do you still not always know where it's going? Or is it with you, because these characters, many of them, Andy, Kay, have been defined before, you pretty much know what they're going to do. You know what their instincts are.
No, I don't.
It's only the story. You don't.
No, I'm almost at the end of my new book, and I don't know where it's going. Don't tell my agent sitting over there. I really don't always know. In fact, in some of my books, I haven't known until 2/3 of the way into who the killer is. Or who the killer is.
Who the killer is.
Sometimes I don't know.
How does it come to you who the killer is?
It comes to me as it comes to my characters. In Unnatural Exposure, when Scarpetta suddenly realized who the killer was, that's when I knew it too. I mean, they were face to face, and I went, oh my God. And it scared me as much as it did her. And I think that's why the books have intensity, is I don't have an artificial outline. I let them go where they're going to go.
Do you ever write alternative endings for them?
I'm trying to think if I've ever done that. No. I adjust endings sometimes, but I don't. I haven't written alternative ones. In fact, sometimes people don't like the way they end because, like in Cruel and Unusual, the killer gets away. Well, you're not supposed to do that. But that's the way it wanted to end, and so I left it there.
How did you know that's the way it wanted to end? Because it just felt right to you? Because that's where the characters were?
My disc was full. It just felt like it was over. And I go, it's very much an interior rhythm and instinct, like how do you know you end a song, and it just felt over with.
At this level of success for you, I mean, is there anything else that you want desperately?
I just want to become better at what I do. And I feel like I have a long way to go. I think that this may sound strange with so many books out, but I feel I'm still learning how to do what I want to do. And that really is my big goal. I would love to have a good movie, but my own craft is far more important to me than that is.
I mean, you could afford to have your own movie. You know that.
I could?
Yeah.
Well,
you could.
You want to be
an $8.5 million advance for your last movie, right?
For my last book?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It was pretty.
It was close to that.
It was up there.
Yeah. What difference does the money make in your life?
Oh, the money facilitates what I do. I'm so fortunate because I can go places fast. I can have people work for me that do all these things in my life, so I don't have to do them.
Like what do they do?
Oh, everything from managed domestic activities to
so
deal with...
So you just write?
I pretty much just write. I have 8 people who work for me. And, of course, we're involved in a lot of little ancillary projects.
Let's go through these people. You've got that, what? What do you have?
Well, personal assistant, office manager, 2 bookkeepers, receptionists.
2 bookkeepers.
You have for every time you hire 4, you got to hire 2 others to manage the 4, so it keeps getting bigger. People that I have 2 graphic artists because we do a lot of graphic art and deal with some of the things like ads and all that go along with the book. I'm in a lot of different things, whether it's fundraisers or special projects, and you would not have time to do them if you didn't have people to carry out your wishes.
When you see Kate in your mind?
It's really funny. I see her from the back. I'll see her walking down the hall with her lab coat on, and I'll sort of see a little bit of the profile and the blondish hair, but I've never really seen her entire face.
Is she tall or short?
No, she's kind of medium height.
She's good looking?
Of course. My characters are always good looking, except for
Why
Marina.
Is that?
Well, nobody wants to read about somebody ugly if they're a main character, I think. No, it's very important that Scarpetta be attractive and like to go home and cook and listen to classical music and all that. It's a fearful symmetry to what she has to deal with every day. If she were an unattractive person and had an unattractive life, in an unattractive, professional life, it would just be so weighty and dreary. Who would want to read it? And God knows I wouldn't want to write it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Back in a moment. Stay with us. The book Southern Cross.